What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys have been doing well since the last posting. Today's video, as you saw the announcement and saw the title of this video, is about Levi Weeks, otherwise known as the Manhattan Well murder. Now, this trial is actually famous for a couple different reasons, which I'll explain to you right now. The first reason being this is the oldest trial in American history that has a surviving trial transcript. And now, there's actually 3 different transcripts for this trial, the third of which is considered to be the most accurate and impartial, but none of them are considered to be like 100% accurate. Like, this is what the judge said, this is what his defense team said, this is what this guy said, this, all that sort of jazz. And the second reason, which is not like a true crime history reason, is that Levi Weeks is actually mentioned in the musical Hamilton. Now you guys might be thinking, why is he mentioned in the musical Hamilton? And I actually didn't know he was mentioned in the musical Hamilton because although I do like musicals and theater, I just don't like that particular show. Not everyone likes every show, but he was mentioned in this show because Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, if I can say his name correctly, were 2 of his 3 defense attorneys. The other one being Henry Livingston, if I could remember people's names here. So those were his 3 defense attorneys funded by his brother who he worked with, but we'll get into all that in a second. So that's why this trial kind of became more of a resurgence, because of the Hamilton reference, and Hamilton being such a big show made some people learn about the case who otherwise never would have known that this case was a thing that had happened, So let's hop back in our time machine, December 22nd, 1799, New York City. It's cold, it's snowing. Young Elma Sands, who's 22 years old and Levi is 23 at the time, she leaves her house that night. The reasons why are varied, and we'll explain that in a second. She leaves the house and she's never seen alive again. And her body is found January 2nd of 1800, so after the Christmas season, in the Manhattan Well, which was put there by the Manhattan Well Company, which was a company, side note, that Burr also owned or co-founded, which today would have been considered a conflict of interest, but him defending Levi doesn't change the fact that her body was found in the well. So that's a bit of a back and forth that you could have there with that. But her body is found January 2nd of 1800. Now, almost immediately, suspicion falls to Levi Weeks, because there's a number of people who initially testified that they were having a sexual relationship. Now, most people today, they wouldn't care. 2 consenting adults doing whatever they want, a 22 and a 23-year-old, as long as they're not doing anything wrong, not doing anything, they're not supposed to be doing, who cares? But this is 1799, and people, religious Quakers, because there were still a lot of Quakers at the time, and religious or not, they cared, and this was viewed as imprudent, improper, which were terms that were said multiple times throughout the trial, asking about the imprudent and improper nature of their relationship, and we'll get into the trial in a second. So he gets arrested for this murder, and the community immediately thinks that he does this, right? They're like, he's guilty. The community's already convinced that he did it, and her family's convinced that they did it. Now, the prosecution has only circumstantial evidence, because there's no evidence tying Levi to the scene that night at the well that placed him with her at that moment that could make him be placed at the scene of the murder. So the defense team really did a good job of poking holes in the prosecution's story, because the prosecution's main story was they were trying to paint Levi as this playboy who was lying to Elma, because they said, and this is the thing I said, remember, that she supposedly left the house that night to go meet up and elope with Levi. Now, that's what her family said. That's what her relatives said, that they were supposed to do that in secret because they were supposedly engaged to be married and they were going to elope. And Levi said, although Levi didn't testify at the trial, Levi said, we were never engaged, we were never married. Now, to my knowledge, he never denied the fact that he was having a relationship with her, but the defense also provided witnesses that showed that she may have also been having relationships with other people as well as him. But we'll get into that, like I said, in just a second as well. But they were together. He gets arrested. He's on trial for this. They were like, look, Levi, you're this playboy. You're this very sort of floozy, for lack of a better term, kind of guy that's going about doing all this stuff. You're lying to her, trying to get her to sleep with you, and she's sleeping with you because you're promising her that, you know, you're going to marry her. And he's like, yeah, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. And the defense team really did a good job of talking about that, because that was their main point. And their main reasoning for him wanting her gone was the fact that the prosecution in court said she was pregnant. They said that was the main reason that he wanted her gone, was because that she was pregnant and he didn't want to bear the responsibility of his actions of being a father. Now, the defense team proved that she wasn't pregnant, because after her body was pulled from the well, she was examined, and the defense team brought the people in that examined her or saw her body shortly after she was pulled from the well, and they said she wasn't pregnant. She wasn't pregnant. There's no nothing to indicate that she was in fact carrying a child. Now, if that's the case, like they just said, that goes to your main motive for murder. Because if you're saying that he did this for X reason, and reason X isn't actually what happened, you need another reason, which they never had. That was their main reason for why he wanted her gone. But even though they were trying to paint him as this sort of playboy kind of guy that was sleeping around, floozying around, they said that he was a good guy because he was an upstanding member of the community. He was, you know, a carpenter, an architect. He was working with his brother on Alexander Hamilton's home at the time he was arrested. They had already worked on the New York City mayor's house, which to this day is still used as the mayor's residence. He would later go on, and this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, to build some other stuff. The Auburn Mansion he designed down south here. I think it's Missouri off the top of my head. But he was an upstanding member and an up-and-coming member of the community. And the only thing that really ties him to the murder is the fact that he was in a relationship with the defendant. Because there were multiple people that testified. Not only was he not there, he was at his brother's house all night. And then the one-horse sleigh that some people tried to say looked similar to the one that his brother Ezra owned. Other witnesses testified saying his sleigh never left his house all night, and he only had about 20 minutes at max unaccounted for, which wouldn't have been enough time to go through and meet up with her wherever she was gonna go and kill her and dispose of her body in the well and all that. Now, the prosecution's big star witness was a man named David Croucher. He testified that they were in this relationship. They were doing this. He was their star witness. And I want you to remember that guy's name for just a second. So he was their star witness. So this trial only lasted 2 days because, like I said, the defense really poked holes in everything the prosecution had, and the prosecution really only had the circumstantial case of trying to tie him to the scene, which there's no evidence he was there that night in the first place. So the judge, as this case is ending, because the defense team declined to make a closing statement because they were like, this is ridiculous. There's absolutely no evidence that he was there. The judge sides with the defense, and he basically, within his instructions to the jury, he goes, look, I'm obviously paraphrasing here, there's no evidence here, this is all circumstantial, you know, he didn't do this, essentially. He stopped short of telling the jury to find him not guilty, but he was essentially telling the jury that he viewed Levi as not guilty. Now, he didn't tell them to find him not guilty, but the jury only deliberated for about 5 minutes before they found him not guilty. And the community where he lived was outraged. Her family was outraged. Everyone was outraged. Which is understandable if you believe that he did it. But like I said, there's nothing tying him to the well that night that conclusively proves that he was there. Now, and the defense actually suggested that she may have, you know, wanted to kill herself because they said she was depressed. They said she was considering trying to drink some laudanum to end her own life. She was, she was sick, all this sort of stuff, and they were saying that her injuries weren't as bad because prosecution tried to say she had a broken neck, this, that, the other thing, and the defense team was like, she doesn't have a broken neck, and all of the injuries she sustained could have been from one, jumping into the well, and two, being in the well for as long as she was in the well. Now, I don't necessarily believe the suicide theory, but I understand why they went as far as they did to show that maybe she was depressed, maybe that was this, to plant that extra seed of doubt into Jerry's mind. But I don't think they needed to do that in the first place, because as you guys know, in American courts, you are entitled to the presumption of innocence. Now, whether that works in every case or not, that's a whole different debate. But you are entitled to the presumption of innocence, and the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed this crime. And they just didn't do that here. But unfortunately for Levi, he's run out of the city. Now, this is the only time he was ever in trouble, only thing he was ever accused of doing. He went on, he built a successful career as an architect, had a wife, had 4 kids, ended up dying in 1819. Now, to my knowledge, Levi never really made a mention of this case. He never really did an interview on the case. So we don't really know from his words what he thought about the case and all that jazz. Like people today give interviews on cases. I don't think he ever did that. Now, what do I think happened here? Now, I want you guys to remember Croucher, who I mentioned earlier. His nickname was Mad Croucher. On the evening of the date that this trial was set to start, the Levi Weeks trial, he got married to a woman that had a 13-year-old daughter. Some of you might be able to see where I'm going with this. Later that same year, later in the year 1800, he was brought to trial and accused of, let's just say he hard R-worded this 13-year-old. And the 13-year-old said, the reason I didn't come forward earlier was because I was afraid I was going to end up like Elma Sands. And now the state of New York, which is where this still takes place, because this man was still living in New York at the time, basically found him, they didn't find him not guilty, but they basically said, we'll drop the charges essentially, just leave the state. That was like a deal they struck, for lack of a better term. So he goes to Virginia, where he continues his crime spree. He continues doing whatever criminal activities that he does. And then he goes to England, which is where he was actually from, because he's actually an Englishman by birth. He was born in England, he came over here, ended up who he ended up as. Now, here's the thing. In England, he was later executed for basically almost the same crime as what happened here. And the defense team basically proved that he hated Weeks. He didn't like Weeks, and he most likely was jealous of the fact that she had an interest in Levi more than him. And so I think that's most likely what happened. It's unfortunate, but I think that Mad Croucher most likely is the guy that killed her. And if not, it was just some random person on the street that killed her. I don't think she offed herself, but that is a likely story. And I wouldn't be surprised if somehow some evidence came forward to prove that she did, but I don't think she did. You know what I mean? But that's what I think happened. I think Croucher killed her. Even if he had been thinking about harming her previously, I just think that he saw the opportunity when she left the boarding house that night alone, when she was by herself that night, cold night, no lights out, to maybe approach her. She tried to defend herself. He kills her with his bare hands, because there was no stab marks on her body. There was just bruising. So when they thought someone murdered her, they thought it was just basically using their hands. And that's what I think happened in this case. I think David Croucher, Mad Croucher, killed her, because he was later executed for basically the same crime in a different country. Let me know what you guys think about this case in the comments. This was definitely a lot more different, not more interesting. It was just different and interesting than some of the modern cases, because you got to try to understand the historical context of the case, and there's more layers when you talk about old old stories and old crime cases in general. But let me know in the comments below what other crime cases and what other stories, not even crime related, that you want to see me covered. Remember to like this video, comment on it, share it, email it to your grandma, hold the seance so all your ghost buddies can watch it, and subscribe to the channel. Watch all my other videos, and until next time, guys, stay safe and have fun.